Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We have opportunity to do a little something interesting today, and we'll share that with you in terms of what was going on and what still goes on today in the world of trade reels and manufacturing under other people's names. So I have 3 reels here. They're identical in everything except cosmetics and naming. And we're going to work on one of these to show you how it goes, but you'll be able to see very clearly that they're all essentially the same reel. Let's start with the ones that's not the imposter, if you will. It's a Daiwa 7700. This is a brown reel, and it was sold in the U.S. Let's see, burgundy knob, and underneath here it tells you it was designed, developed, and in California, U.S., manufactured in Japan, and of course it's the Daiwa reel. Then we have a model 910 from Sears Roebuck, and it says underneath that a 779414424, which is the codes that Sears always used, the 9 number code. Underneath here, well, what does it say? It reads the same as the Daiwa. Designed and engineered in California, manufactured in Japan. And then we have another example of this one, which is earlier than the 910. This is the Sears reel without the 910 on it, just that 9-digit code. So all 3 of these reels are identical and mechanically. And all it shares differently is, well, the cosmetics. Brown, gray, black. The knobs are almost identical. If you look at them, just one's black plastic and the other's red plastic. The handle's a little bit of a variation on the handle. And that's what happened with trade manufacturers and companies that made reels, made the same reels under different brands, so that they could be marketed individually. So in this case, we've got the Daiwa 7700, marketed by Sears in that case. And well, I'm sure there's other examples out there. This one's running, and we're going to use this one because, well, it's the original, not the other. But even if you look at the bail assembly on the Sears reel, it's the same bail. So the parts are interchangeable. Well, let's get started. Let's show you how it's made, and it's a beautiful reel. And I know there's folks out there in our channel, Chris would be one of them, that just likes these old reels. I'd like them too. And this one has the older Dacron line on it. I'm going to leave it on there for now. But I don't want it to interfere with the work that I'm going to do, so I'm going to take a rubber band, place that over the spool so that it doesn't come undone as I'm trying to work on the reel. We'll get to those drag washers at the end of the segment if you're wondering how to service the drag washers. The look underneath is it's pretty hulking, and I noticed when I was going to set that this is just a little bit temperamental. Doesn't seem to want to move as quickly as it could move. Snaps nice. We have a mouse trap there. That's generally because the greases and the like have dried up. So before you do anything with a bail that's appearing sluggish to you, do this. Take the penetrating oil. In this case, I'm using a WD-40 as a penetrating oil, and kind of soak. You can see it's all puddled up in there. Soak the trip mechanism, the bail arms where they meet the rotor, and just kind of work it in a little bit. Wow, look at that. I mean, I just picked that right up. Now we want to make sure that it's just going to jump over here, and it jumped right in here. So I didn't have to take that bail off, and I won't take that bail off as part of the service, simply because, well, it's working. So you don't need to deal with anything beyond that at this point. All right. Well, if you like these type of videos, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button. That's going to let you know when I'm posting and what type of reel I'm working on, and you can see if that's one that you would be interested in watching. These have cosmetic issues on it. You saw on the Sears reels, you see here, there's bubbling of the old paint. And sometimes folks want to repaint the reel, and you're welcome to do that. It's your reel. You can do what you like. I like to leave the cosmetics as it is, develop that certain patina to it, the wear spots where you have no paint, where it's blistered. Kind of tells the story of what that reel's life has been. And well, I kind of more appreciate it that way than I do in a newly repainted reel. Okay, I want to check to make sure that the anti-reverse is working. It is. Now I want to flip that anti-reverse to the off position and backpedal it. And that's because when I remove pieces and parts from the inside, I don't want to do anything to disrupt that anti-reverse setup if at all possible. With that removed, we note that there's nothing coming through this side, so this needs to be a screw-in handle. And we're going to just turn it the opposite way of the way that the reel works. And I notice this is a little sticky, so we're going to use that penetrating oil again to just kind of help me take it off so that I don't cross thread or anything. And we're going to remove that. And I can see, I mentioned it was sticky, you can see the old dirt and grease and like has accumulated on the inside of this. So as you're removing the pieces and parts, take the opportunity to inspect them, clean them, and well, see if you can't get them right again. This adjuster nut that's going to allow me to flip this handle back and forth appears to be stuck. I don't force those issues, but I am going to put some penetrating oil in there in the hopes that it can help us along. Only 2 screws hold this side case on now. There's one up and one below. They are both Phillips head screws. So we're going to take those off. And we'll have our first look at the inside of this reel. And again, on a trade reel, they don't change the engineering. They change the colors and the cosmetics and the decals and things like that. But for the most part, it's the same reel. Now, they've gotten a little bit better over time now in terms of giving it a little more personalization. It's still using the same components. But in the old days, it was just change the coloring on it. Well, we can see why this one is kind of struggling a little bit here. It's very dried grease, and we're going to take care of that quickly. We're going to remove the pin that's in the crosswind block here. Good time to tell you when we're doing this, these are old reels. You may or may not be able to find the documentation on them. You probably would not find the documentation on it. If you were looking under Sears Roebuck, you probably would find the documentation in sites like orca.org and others. If you were searching on the Daiwa 7700, but again, if you didn't know with Sears, you might not be able to search for that. So one of the clues about how to be successful at doing this is to take pictures. So take a picture in how you found the reel before you started removing things, which would have included that pin as well. And that way you know that you have a reference points should you become disoriented on the way back out. All right, this one, remove the pin. Our axle shaft should pull up and out. Notice when you pull that axle shaft up and out, if there's any resistance at all. If you find resistance on an axle shaft, it may mean that you have a bent axle shaft, and well, that would have to be replaced. It's hard to straighten one of those, but you do want to examine your pieces and parts as you do this. One of the things that's the enemy of fishing reels is dirt and dried grease. So you want to clean the pieces as you do this. Again, inspecting them. This is your crosswind block. This block is symmetrical. So same whether you flip it this way or that way. It's always nice to note the orientation. This was up when I removed it. But sometimes you'll find that they're not. Sometimes this pinhole will be low or high. Sometimes this will be U-shaped. Just notice how that is, and that picture will help you when you do that. We're going to remove the rotor. That's held on by a nut. And this was probably a 1970s or early 1980s reel. It's going to be using metrics. And I keep a group of sockets right near my bench here just in case I need to find that. I probably should have set this up as a video, but you know, this is kind of I'm in my shop, I got something to do, and let's go do a video on that while I have it, because there's a lesson to be learned here kind of thing. And I'm not necessarily always prepped, if you will, for the piece. All right, this one's tight. One of the things you want to check when you're doing this is, does the nut move left or right? Sometimes these are counter threaded or reverse threaded, and if you try to remove it in a typical lefty loosey type of an arrangement, you're going to break it off. So that's why I was a little bit more cautious there, because some of the Daiwa reels do have that reverse threading on it. This one has a lockdown nut, so that's probably why they decided it was okay to do it the other way. All right, then that's off. You're going to notice there's nothing in here, right? A lot of times you'll open it up, you're going to see anti-reverse dogs, you're going to see bearings, you're going to see everything. No, this reel is a very simply designed reel. With the rotor off, you can push your pinion gear out. You're going to find out all you have in here is a brass bushing, and underneath here you have a washer. So take the pictures so that you know how it goes. We set the anti-reverse dog to off, because if it was on and you're pushing your main gear out now, you may push that right off the post. And here's another thing the pictures help you with. There is a spring load on this. You can notice it's anchored here. It looks like a big U-clip. It comes into the bottom and rests under that anti-reverse dog. So if that spring comes off, that picture will save you in terms of how to get it back together again. Let's push this gear through. And I can assure you, if you're working on either version of that Sears reel, or if you're working on this one, it's all the same. All right, we've got some cleanup to do here. We're going to take the old grease off the pinion gear. I'm going to flood that pinion gear with penetrating oil. I'm going to use a bristle brush to clean out the teeth of that pinion gear. I want to get the old greases out of there. And then we can set this one aside in that parts tray. Same thing here with that washer that goes underneath. Got a little bit more of the dried grease on the side of the main gear here, so let's take care of that. And again, the bristle brush is great for something like this, because there's grease that's in, nesting inside those little indentations there. Sometimes you'll need something like a flat-bladed screwdriver or something to get in there and get that out. And a lot of times folks say, oh, you know, it's there, I'm just going to leave it. Well, you don't need to be lazy. You don't get any points for going fast. And interestingly enough, because all of this grease worked by gravity, it all sat on the one side of the gear, so the reel was probably stored like this. Gravity just kind of made it all come down to the lower level there. But when you do this, if you tried to start this reel back up again, you might notice it has a slight imbalance to it. And that's because the weight of the grease in the one side of it would throw that off. No, not tremendously, right? But it could. And why take the chance? All right, just did the same thing on the other side after we've cleaned this one. Put that penetrating oil into the teeth on the face of this. Pulling it through to make sure it's clean. Well, these parts are big enough, I'm not going to lose them if I don't put them into a parts tray. So we're going to do that. We have 2 shim washers on the main gear, and we get some crusty old grease inside. So we're going to clean the inside of the case here as well. Same idea, same approach. I'm going to use a cotton swab here and clean this off. And what's nice to see, there's no rust. There is some loose paint here, but not much. I think most of the time that's external. It's the parts that have been exposed to salt water and the like that are going to bubble up. But inside the case, it's pretty good. It actually gives you a good indication. If you were going to repaint the reel, that's probably the best part to go after. And as I was just saying about that picture and that dog, well, I just knocked that dog off, right? It's okay. It wanted to tell me that it felt like it needed attention too. but at least I took the time to understand how that dog was set so that I can reset that dog after I clean up here. I'm going to clean up in aisle 7. We've taken care of that. Now, a lot of times pieces and parts aren't available for a reel like this. Again, it's probably a 40-year-old reel at this point, at least, maybe even a 50-year-old reel. And you do know now, or maybe you didn't know then, which is the reel has the sisters, or the counterparts in the Sears reel. All right, this is how that goes, right? I took the picture. Kind of sits up on that hole, compresses the spring. This one sits in the back there. Okay, we've reinstalled that. I'm going to take those 2 shim washers now. I'm going to place those over the gear side. We've cleaned up the back side of this gear. Next up will be to put a little bit of grease onto the gear post. And you want to use fishing reel grease when you use when it's time to re-lube. You want to use fishing reel greases and fishing reel oils. And get them on the back post. We're going to get the grease into all of the teeth, or most of the teeth. You don't have to get them in all of them. The pinion gear is going to spread it around. And you also want to get grease, in this case, on the face of this main gear, because that crosswind block that we took off is going to slip and slide around that. So you want to put that there as well. Once you've greased that up, kind of find the 2 center holes for those shim washers and bring your main gear in. At this point, I generally like to put the handle back on because I know that that can slip out. And I don't need it slipping out on me as I go to install that pinion gear. So I'm going to put the handle on. Now, in order to do that, you need to hold that back main gear. Next up then, we want to take the pinion gear that we've cleaned. It's a beautiful piece of metal. I think it might be a stainless steel pinion gear. It looks very nice. Well made, sharp, crisp cuts. That's a mark of an outstanding piece of manufacturing. So a lot of times people think that things like the Sears brand is something second market, if you will, second tier. In this case, it was made by Daiwa. It even told you it was made by Daiwa in Japan. And, well, it's just, you can get good values there as trade reels. And that goes today. You can buy a nice trade reel from Cabela's or Bass Pro or places like that that are made by reputable manufacturers. Okay, you have to put that washer in here. You can't put the washer on the stem because you won't clear the teeth here. You can see how that washer sits below the teeth. Once you do that, bring that gear back in. You may need to turn the main in order to mesh them, but you will be able to push that up. Once you push that up, bring your rotor over. There's a flat spot on the rotor that will mesh with the pinion gear. And if you lose that lock, that's fine. Bring that down. Probably need to clean the lock off anyway. That's got a little rust on it. That's not cleanable. Find your 2 flat spots on the piece, and then there's a bulge or a hump or whatever you want to call it that you need to align that so that it goes inside there, kind of kicks the fuel roll. All right, now we can put this back on. We know from the way we took it off that this is a traditional clockwise reinstall, or righty-tighty, if you will. Then we can grab our deep socket, and you need a deep socket for this. You can't tighten that reel with an open-faced wrench. It simply won't reach in over the sides of the bowl. Turn that in, bring that down. Next up then is to reinstall your crosswind block, and the only thing you need grease on here is the back face. That's the only thing you'll be connecting with anything. Get some into the slot. Once you do that, find the stud on the main gear. That stud rides in the slot. With that done, make sure that your axle shaft is clear. A very light coat of grease here, because it's going to pass through the pinion gear, and any globs of grease is going to get scraped off as it goes through. It's a tight fit. Bring that down. Align your cross wind block so that it can accept the axle shaft. Find the hole, and then after you get that into the bottom, align the hole to accept the pin. Just like that. That's the inside of the reel. If you want to see how that reel works, it works like this. If you want to make sure that you got your anti-reverse dog on correctly, now you can bring it back because it's not going to jump anywhere. And we have our anti-reverse. So that's the inner workings of the reel. Next up, we're going to take that case and just put that back on, and then we'll show you how to service the drag washers. And you should do a full service on all of your reels. Anything in this reel could fail if you're under a fight, and you don't want anything to fail, so service everything. We showed you how to free up the bail if it's sticking, and if you had a bad bail spring or something just was terribly stuck, well, that's the time you can go ahead and take that apart and make sure that everything that you're working on here will ensure a nice day on the water. Whether you're surf casting with this reel or fishing it from a boat, doesn't matter. What you need is a reliable machine, and servicing it like this will ensure that it stays reliable for some time to come. I mentioned dirt's the enemy of fishing reels, so get rid of some of those dirty pieces. The last part we want to show you then is how to service the drag washers. They are inside the top spool, and I am kind of curious what we have for drag washers here. Daiwa used a variety of drag washers. They used felt, they used cork, they used leather, and they've used plastic. So we're going to just turn that whole stack around, see what we have, and we kind of have the hard fabric washers. And just like we did with everything else here, we want to make sure that we clean up what's left over. So we got one more piece here. There's a little bit of salt that has accumulated on the inside here. Going to let the penetrating oil dissolve that, wipe it out. And why does that get there? Well, this is a top drag fishing reel. It's like this. When the line is spooling around the outside of the spool, it's wet. It's dropping water into the bowl here. That water's only got one place to go, which is down. All right. These are hard washers. You really do not need to do anything with a hard washer. And that's not unusual for fishing reels of this era, because quite honestly, people didn't service drag washers very much back then. So they kind of put something in that said, try to get to a point where it's not serviceable or it doesn't need to be serviced. I'm just going to use a little bit of grease. These things probably are not permeable, so they wouldn't absorb the grease anyway. But that's just kind of a thing that's, well, going to ease my conscience. Make sure that your metals are nice and clean and tight. And we alternate the drag washers with the metal washers. This is a traditional 6-drag system. You're going to find 2 drag washers that look like this. They're called keyed washers. They're round on the outside with rectangles on the inside. And one that has what's called the eared washer. It's round in the center with 2 studs sticking out. That's the next one in here, and that goes into slots in the spool, one on each side. Now I'm going to grab one more of these. That goes in, our last of our washers. This one's got that telltale sign that that's been the top washer, because it's got all that kind of sea film and the like there. And while I think it's probably going to be easiest right now to put this back on to the reel so that we can make sure that we're aligning those keyed washers with the little pieces inside. These are just things you learn over time. Sometimes it's a little harder to do this. All right, we're aligned there. Next up, we have a spring washer that's going to be providing tension and variability. And then we have that final keyed washer goes on top. So if you have one of these, you now know the sequence to that. Okay, well, you remember when we did this that it had a retention ring on it. is your retention ring. There's a slot inside the spool that accepts that tension ring. Most of the time you can put it in with hand strength. Just make sure it's seated down there, and that's how that goes. All right, I think we'll do one more thing here. We're just going to take that little piece we have here. A little bit later I'll probably take that Dacron line off and clean up the spool completely, but for now, for the purposes of this video, we'll just leave it as it is and just call that a hole mark. Okay, you can spend a moment or two or 10 or whatever you like. You can clean, or you can repaint, or you can just leave it like it is and just get some of the old grease off of there. I just choose to leave that patina and its life story or history kind of show through there. And well, nothing left here, but then I'll give it a test, see how we did. We knew it was running nice to begin with. We just cleaned out all the old dirt and debris, greases and oils that have been dried. This thing should be a real nice performer now. Oh, look at that. That's a beauty. And there's not a single ball bearing in here. So don't run out and get that latest version of the reel which has 19 ball bearings. You know what? You don't need it. In this case, this is a beautiful example of a reel that doesn't have any. And that also tells you a little bit about the time. Now, I am noticing we have a little squeak here in the handle. So there's the penetrating oil here, and that'll get rid of that squeak. We can mount this one on a surf pole. We can take it fishing tomorrow. And it could be something that we would be proud to be fishing with, and something where if we got that strike, we know we would be able to land it worry-free. Well, I hope you've enjoyed seeing that one and learning a little bit about the history of trade reels. And again, if you take either one of these and open them up, you're going to see exactly the same thing that you saw in the Daiwa reel that we just did here, and you'll have years of trouble-free fishing with those in addition to this one. There's absolutely no difference between the three other than the color and the cosmetics. I hope you've enjoyed that. I want to take a moment and thank our first responders, our police, fire, safety, rescue, EMTs, everybody involved in dedicating their life and their careers' work to public safety service and keeping us out of harm's way. And I want to thank you, the viewer, for watching, for making this channel what it is. If you've enjoyed the video, please like it. And again, if you want to see more of these, please subscribe. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.